I did 3 to 5.
Right.
So, and I replaced all the tape with a pretty blue station.
Oh yeah. Very nice. Yep.
I tore them
Alice, are you ready?
Now, wait a minute, Pastor, we're doing some business.
Oh, you're doing business. All right.
out.
Well, I have to get started, even though you're doing business, Roberta. Yeah. So, I'll be honest with you. I am enjoying this more of a laid-back atmosphere that we've had the last few weeks. I really enjoy this, and I like the comfortableness of all this, and I enjoy this. I enjoy seeing everybody smile and all that stuff. Not that we weren't doing that before. It just feels different. It feels there's just it's just more comfortable. I feel like I like having the looseness of that. Because Lori is a rule follower, I'm a rule breaker. I really don't like. They're only guidelines. Rules are just like guidelines, and Lori says no, black and white. There's rules for a reason. But we are totally different in that. So I've got just a few announcements. We are having the Bible study tomorrow. Christian and Christina will be here around midnight tomorrow night. And then, so I'll be here all day tomorrow. We'll have the Bible study. We'll have our normal thing. There's no counting for tomorrow. We'll push that off until the following week, which I think is Sue and Roberta. And so we'll put that off for 1 week. Wednesday prayer meeting will restart February 24th. So not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, we're going to kick that off again and make sure that we're all fairly healthy as we come and join together and take part in that. And don't forget that we still have some cards in the little cubby holes back here. And if you have the ability, if you feel like you can do that safely and want to drop off some of the cards to some of our church members, that would be great. If you have the means, just to get a roll of stamps, and you would like to just do it that way, that would help the church out as well. So either way that you want to do that, however you want to help, that would be great. And don't forget, there's also maybe 10 offering boxes back there. If you have not picked yours up, go ahead and do that, because believe it or not, we're still taking up offering through all this, so if you are missing that, if you can help with the cards, that would be great. Is there any other announcements that I might be forgetting that somebody is aware of? One thing I did realize this week is that we did not sing Happy Birthday for February, did we, Jim? We did not. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to try to do this by myself.
Oh, no.
Why are you laughing? Brenda, she just thought that was the funniest thing in the world. I'm going to lead the music and Brenda just busts out laughing. You're going to see how funny it really is, Brenda. So you were not off base with that. But who's got birthdays in February? I know that Donna Butner does. Carol, we've got a few. Vanessa, you want to come up and sing with me, Vanessa? No? I didn't think so. All right, so here we go. I'm going to lead us off, but I need you guys to step up and drown me out. Okay, that's the plan. All right? All right, so here we go. Happy birthday to you. Louder. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, God bless you. Happy birthday to you. That is the last time you will ever hear me do that. Ever.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
If you call that singing, we are in really good trouble. All right, so we've got all these announcements, and I enjoy coming together and just sharing life together. Right? That's what this is all about, and I really enjoy it. We're going to start a series today on the life of Jesus. And what we're going to do is we're going to go chronologically through the Gospels. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We're going to chronologically go through these books. And today we're going to focus on the early years, 12 years old and under. And a lot of this is going to be review. A lot of it is going to be, we talked about different things for Christmas, about Jesus being born and different things like that. So some of it's going to be review. I'm not going to touch on absolutely everything, but I think that there's enough in today's sermon, which is really going to be an intro into the rest of his life, right? That's what today's going to be. There's the introduction into the rest of his life. And my goal would be, one thing that I love to do, and I've said this before, one thing that I want to do is I want to tie in some world history, things that were going on in other areas of the world, in Rome and different, and it's things that you heard of in school, in history class, and different things here that I did not know that was going on the same time this was happening, and the same time that Jesus was on earth. I didn't know that. And so that's one of my goals through this entire series, is tie in some world history. Did you realize this was going on at the same time that Jesus was walking the earth? And those type of things really, I think, it interests me, and I hope that it interests you guys as well. The song that we have today, Lori and I had never heard this before until we found it a couple of days ago, and I think it's Misty Williams, Misty Freeman, and she's apparently the only one that sings this song, and it's a day in the life of Jesus. And I thought as we started this series out, we would play this song, and you may hear this song later on in the series because it is so good, and the words are just so, it applies to everything that we're going to talk about the next several weeks. So let's watch that now.
I never called
song, isn't it? So when we saw that and heard that for the first time, even though we hadn't heard it before, you could almost sing along with it because it was just an easy pace, and it was really nice. It was just a super nice song. So you probably will hear that again in the next few weeks, because once we get into the life of Jesus and the different things that he did, man, that song applies so well. And have you ever, I was just standing over there thinking, have you ever just kind of just sat down and thought what it was like to be like Jesus just for a day? Just his normal routine on a day, and they talked about feeding the 5,000 and different things, and he's like, oh, this is just all in a day's work. Could you imagine what was all in the day's work of Jesus and what he was capable of doing and everything that he knew and was aware of? And it was just all in the day's work for him, because that's what he was put here on this earth to do. And man, if we would capture that idea, just being kind to people, just treating people like decent human beings, and that goes for everybody. But if we just did something like that and just took it in stride, it's just the day in the life of being a Christian. That's just how I need to act. That's just now how I need to treat people. It's just the way it is. And if that was our attitude, it would be, I think, so much different all over this nation for sure, but all over the world. But anyway, that's totally free. I'm not going to charge you extra for that. It's not even in my notes. We are going to start with King Herod. Most of our conversation this morning is going to be about King Herod because he played such a huge role in the early years of Jesus that we should focus on him, because I want to have you guys realize what the world was like when Jesus was born. Over 400 years, God was silent, and then finally, through the angels and the shepherds and different means, through talking to Mary, talking to Joseph, he was finally coming around and saying, okay, the time's coming, here it comes, get ready, it's coming. And so I want to focus, today we're going to do basically an introduction. This morning's sermon is going to be an introduction. It's going to be what Jesus' childhood was like, 12 years and under at the time, and the things that happened in his early life that really started to form as his family around him started to form, okay? So King Herod ruled over Israel when Jesus was born. Now we know that basically because, most Christmas sermons, and we talk about the manger, we talk about everything, King Herod is thrown in there, but a lot of times we don't go into great detail about why and how certain people were put in position. Because here's what I believe 100%, that God is in control of absolutely everything. Amen. So here's what I believe about King Herod, is that God placed him, as evil as he was, as crazy as he was, and we're going to talk about some of the things that he did, even to his own family. It took that type of leader to be put in place to accomplish God's greater good. Does that make sense? So as we look at some of these things that King Herod did and how he rose up into power, always remember in the back of your mind, he's got his hand in this, because there are certain prophecies that need to be fulfilled that my son is going to fulfill. And this guy has to be in position in order for that to happen. Does that make sense? So it's not just, oh, look, King Herod was there and he just so happened, right? Because we don't believe in that. We don't believe in luck. Luckily, King Herod did exactly what God needed him to do, right? That doesn't happen. It takes a certain leader, a certain type of personality to allow God to use that. And we're going to see that in just a minute. So Herod's father, so this goes back a generation. Herod's father was in very good favor with Julius Caesar. You guys heard of Julius Caesar, right? So we're talking about this time frame. And he was appointed the leader over the affairs of all the Judean area. So Herod's father was in charge of basically all of Israel, all the surrounding areas. And Herod was in turn, by his father, entrusted with the governorship of Galilee, shortly following his father's rise to that leadership in that area. So Herod, being the kind of leader he was, the kind of person he was, he started forming relationships with people that could influence his political career. And so through these relationships, he started getting promoted to different positions in the region. And he was a ruthless leader, and Rome loved him. The Roman leaders, the Roman government loved him, how he ruled, how he decided to make decisions and things like that. And he was condemned by the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees and other the religious leaders in the time because of how he handled things. He started a project to rebuild the temple and do different things in Jerusalem and different things. And he did it his own way. And he totally disregarded the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin, their input. And they said, oh, you need to do it this way. It needs to be certain size. And he just totally disregarded that. And so for that one reason alone, they were like, we can't stand this guy. And so all these things are playing out. And it's even on a faith-based level, a religious level. But also he's got influence from Rome. And he's got all these other influences that are kind of forcing him into making certain decisions. And so Herod's leadership expanded even more when Mark Antony of Cleopatra fame, remember that guy? From all the Shakespearean blah, blah, blah and all that stuff that I've never read. And so that same guy, Mark Antony, promoted him to second in command over the entire region. So now he's like the administrators last week when we talked about Daniel and different things. He's like the vice president over the entire region. So he's gone from governorship over Galilee to basically the vice president over this entire area. And he's done it through relationships, and some of these relationships had to do with various wives he took, their families, all this stuff. It was a big drama that was going on all around him. And so, shortly following this appointment, the Roman Senate, now this is where it starts getting tricky. The Roman Senate, right after they promoted, Mark Antony promoted him to second in command, the Roman Senate they called him the King of the Jews. So he had the official title based on what the Roman government wanted to give him as the King of the Jews. Now that means something totally different to the people of that area, right? It means something totally different to us as we think about that. So and we'll get to this in just a second. So if Rome appointed him as King of the Jews, and we've got the Magi that come in and say, hey, we're looking for the King of the Jews, what is that going to do to you? Right. You're going to be upset, you're going to be angry, you're going to be jealous. So all these feelings start boiling up in King Herod in just a little bit. And so he led the sole leader. He became the sole leader of Judea, and he held that role for 40 years. And he actually got to the point where in public, he would identify, this is a real, cool thing, a phrase to use nowadays, but he would identify as a Jew. When he was out in public, I'm one of you guys. I'm just like you. But man, he was getting all of his direction and everything from Rome. So he was just playing whoever he was in front of, that's who he was, right? And so he was playing both sides of the coin pretty much all the time. And so that is when the Magi come into the picture. They come from the east, and they search for the true King of the Jews, which Herod was appointed just a little bit ago from Rome. Go to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2, and we're going to look at, again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this because we read a lot of these passages every Christmas, and so we're fairly familiar with these. But it says, Matthew chapter 2, start in verse 1. It says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his stars when it rose and have come to worship him. Now, verse 3 even says, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. Right? He was pretty upset that these guys came from out of town and said, where's the real King of the Jews? And he's like, you're looking at him. And he said, no, this baby was just born, and through prophecy, we know that he is the next Messiah. And so he tells the Magi, well, he consults with all his smart people in his cabinet and everything. And he tells the Magi, well, here's what I want you to do. How about if you go to Bethlehem and find the baby, wish him well, and then come back and tell me where he's at so I can go worship him. That is not what he was going to do at all. He had planned on taking out the family, right? That's what he was going to do because we'll find out. He has taken out his wives. He's taken out his own sons. He has no problem eliminating people that are in his way. And so he sends the Magi, you guys go and find out where he's at and let me know. Well, the Magi go out, they find him, they give him the gifts, the frankincense and myrrh and gold. How could I forget gold? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They give that to him. And then before they head back to King Herod, they get visited from an angel and says, nah, you guys don't need to go back over there. That's nothing but trouble. You need to take off the other direction and head home a different way. And so that's what they did. And so here's a couple of things I want to point out. This happened, and this might, and I'm trying not to wade too far into the weeds about this, but this actually happened around between 4 and 6 BC. Okay? Which means, most likely, Jesus was born about between 4 and 6, probably closer to 6 BC. And so I can see all the question marks over your head. Well, wait a minute. I've always been taught that BC and AD, what that meant, and BC meant before Christ. Without getting too technical about this, very briefly, what happened was 500 years. So you've got the birth of Jesus, you've got his whole life, you've got things. Almost 600 years, like 575 years later, some monk decides we need to figure out an official time frame of eras, before and after and everything. So 500 years, 575 years, I think, this monk decided we're going to make what we believe is the birth of Christ year 0. Okay? So from that point on, everybody just adopted this BC and AD to be 0, which is right there. Well, come to find out, many decades and centuries later, that we find out that once we go back in the timeline and we read other writings by Josephus and different people like that, Jesus wasn't born when that monk thought he was. Okay? This is totally confusing, isn't it? I'm trying not to get too deep into this. But anyway, it's probably too late. But anyway, so that's why when I say that Jesus was probably born actually between 4 and 6 BC, That's why, is because there wasn't a whole lot of information given when they decided, well, 0 year is going to be this year. This is when the best information that we have, this is when we believe that Jesus was born. Well, as it turned out, it wasn't, right? So that is totally confusing, and you can just forget the last 5 minutes ever happened in your life if you want to. But I needed to throw that out there because I knew that when I said that Jesus was born 4 to 6 years BC, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And obviously it doesn't. And so this was about the time that Herod was giving orders to execute his own sons, his own wives. He got reports from different people that he trusted that some of his sons were getting ready to lead a revolt so they could be king and all this other kind of stuff. So he just started killing his family. He said, if you guys are going to do this to me, even if it's not true, and I hear about it, I'm just going to kill you. And so he ends up having, a handful of wives, which who would want that anyway? But he ends up having a bunch of wives and different sons, and they all contemplate against him and everything like that. So he is at a point, at this time when Jesus is born, he is at a point in his life where he's already had his throne threatened. You see how God's working here? Mm-hmm. You see how this puzzle is coming together? After 400 years of God being silent, he's working behind the scenes to get all the pieces in place to make this perfect. Right? All right, let's look at chapter 2, and let's get down to verse 13. So this is after the Magi visit, and they turn and they go their own separate way. It says, when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up and take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up and took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. And then verse 16. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. He's got a problem with that, doesn't he? He was furious. And he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years and under, in accordance with the time that he learned from the Magi. Verse 17. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they were no more. A lot of commentators, a lot of religious leaders refer to this time in the period as the massacre of the innocent, the slaughter of the innocent, because that is exactly what he did. King Herod was so threatened by this new Messiah that had been born. In order to take care of the problem, he just killed all the male boys, not only in Bethlehem, but in the surrounding areas, because they could have. In this time period, 2 years had passed. In this time period, they could have moved out, went back to Nazareth. They could have done all kinds of different things. So not only in Bethlehem, but in the vicinity, in the surrounding areas, Herod killed all the male children 2 years and under. That's the kind of guy that we're dealing with. That's the environment that Jesus was born in. That's the environment that Mary and Joseph, in the first 2 years of their lives together, right? Like, what is going on here? Now, for the rest of this time, I want you to put yourselves in Mary and Joseph's shoes for a while. as we read the rest of the text that we're going to talk about, as we read different things, I want you to just for a few minutes, I want you to think about what it was like to be the parent of Jesus Christ. And at this point right now, you're thinking, you know, you've been visited by an angel, which has happened before, so it's nothing new. I'm sure it would still be surprising. But the angel says, you guys need to go to Egypt because he's about to kill your son. The next time that you held baby Jesus in your arms and you looked at him and you were like, who are you? Why is this king so afraid of you? I mean, I know we were visited by the angel, and I know what the angel said, but who are you? Who are you going to be for this nation? Are you going to be the greatest leader that we've ever seen? The greatest warrior? Is that what you're going to be? Can you imagine getting word from an angel that the king that is in rule over you wants to kill your child? And the next time that you pick him up, it's like, wow, who are you? What's going on with this? Have you ever thought about their thought process behind any of that? So let's go down to verse 19. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph, and they probably lived in Egypt probably close to 3 years. So that's how long they were in exile. That's how long they were in hiding. So I want you to think about something else. God, knowing this, having the Magi come and visit them and give them enough resources. You know, luckily, the Magi came and visited just before they were supposed to leave for Egypt and give them gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, it's funny because, and I don't remember which one, but one of them, either frankincense or myrrh, were also used to medical reasons. If you got sick, if you got cut, if you got things like that, and it would help heal wounds and different things like that. So I want you to think about this just for a minute and how God was working behind the scenes. God provided financially for Jesus and his family with the gold, right? They didn't have to worry about anything. They could go and they could disappear in Egypt for 3 years and not have to rely on anybody. They also had other resources, the frankincense and myrrh, that they could sell if they needed to, or barter, different things like that. But they also didn't even need to visit a doctor, most likely, in those 3 years. That's how strong of a medication that this was. God took care of them, didn't he? And he had this planned out the entire time. Now, we don't necessarily know what God is doing behind the scenes in our lives. Right? A lot of times we're right in the middle of what seems like we got to get out of Egypt, or we got to, we're in that situation where it is a desperate time in our lives. And God is like, he's up in heaven going, man, just wait. Just wait until next week and you see what I have put into place for you. Wait until next year. You're going to look back on 2020, 2021. You're going to look back on these 2 years and you're going to be able to see how I was working behind the scenes. I had it taken care of. You guys were so worried about all this stuff that was piddly. And I had all this stuff worked out. You just needed to be patient on my timing. See, that's what's going on right now. Is that God has a plan. He had a plan back then. He has a plan right now. Nothing that happens in your life, nothing happens in my life without God's knowledge and approval. There's reason behind all of it. All right, let's keep going. We did 19 and then 20. It says, "Get up and take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel." Is that where we are?
Yeah.
For those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up, took the child and his mother, and they went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Go over to Luke. All the rest of our passages this morning are going to be in the book of Luke. Luke chapter 2 is where I want to go. I'm going to go all the way down to verse 39 and 40 in Luke chapter 2. Now there was a time, and again, not to get too deep into the weeds, some people wonder if this passage in Luke that we're getting ready to talk about contradicts what we already read in Matthew, and how can all this timeline fit together? And if you want to know that information, come and talk to me about it. But basically, it does work out that when Jesus, there was a time period from when Jesus was presented in the temple and all that kind of stuff, to when they went down to Egypt, they came back and lived in Nazareth. It all works out in the timeline. So the Bible does not contradict itself. And if you want to talk about that, if you have questions about that, just come talk to me. I don't want to get knee deep into those weeds that we already ventured in. But here's what I want to read in verse 39 to 40. It says, "When Joseph and Mary had done everything required by the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth." That is an indication that they had already lived in Nazareth before. And so there's the idea that after they went up to, because we're talking about 2 years from when he was born to when the Magi, that they went to present him in the temple a month after he was born. They went and lived in Nazareth for a while. That's where the angel visited him and all that kind of stuff, so they went back. So anyway, it says, to their own town, Nazareth. "And the child grew and became strong, and he was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was on him." Jesus and his family finally settled in Nazareth. And during this time, they participated in the annual pilgrimage. There's 3 different festivals that the Jewish people, they still celebrate, and it's the time when they go back to their homeland and everything. And this is one of them, the festival of the Passover. So every year they participated in this, and they would take baby Jesus every time that they would do this. And they did this in remembrance of the Jewish families that were spared by the angel during the final plague, when Moses was trying to get them to exit out of Egypt underneath Pharaoh's reign. And so they had the 10 plagues. The killing of the firstborn was the 10th plague, and that's how they were protected when they put the blood over the doorposts and their signposts and things like that. So they are going back every year. They go back to their homeland, and they celebrate this most of the time a week long, maybe 2 weeks, a long celebration during that time. Let's go down to verse 41. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. You just left the Messiah all by himself in Jerusalem. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Just think about, again, we're looking at this now from the parents' point of view, Mary and Joseph, and we're looking like, how could this happen? Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. They didn't even realize he was gone for an entire 24-hour period. Right? They began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, he had been missing for 4 days now. Can you imagine? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. After 3 days, they found him in the temple court, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." Verse 49, "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So there's a couple of things I want to point out, and I like telling stories. I like helping put you in the situation that we just read. And so at the age of 12, he's been doing this for 12 years. Every year they go to this thing. So finally, after 12 years of age, he starts testing the waters a little bit. He goes into the temple courts and he starts, I'm sure that he started out listening to some of the teaching that was going on, some of what the philosophers were saying, some of the things they were saying. And I'm sure that he was sitting there like, part of it, I'm sure he was like, "Oh, you guys are so far off. You have no idea what's going on." How often do you think he does that in our lives right now? We think we know what's best for our lives most of the time, don't we? And then he's sitting back and he's like, "Oh, you are so far off. If only you knew what I had planned for you. If only you knew what I knew. You wouldn't be so worried about this. You wouldn't be so uptight. You wouldn't, whatever it is. If only you knew what I knew. But you got to trust me." And so, at the age of 12, he was starting to test the waters, so to speak, as he began sharing the knowledge that he had. Right? He was still fully God and fully man at this point. I believe that 100%. So, he is, here's what I want you to picture. Picture, especially if you were a teacher back in the day, think of a 12-year-old student wandering into the teacher's lounge and start listening to your conversations about math, about English, about this, whatever class that you were teaching. And then he speaks up, this 12-year-old, speaks up and said, "Well, have you ever thought about quantum physics?" And you're like, "What?" I mean, you think about how Jesus, and I'm sure that he did it in a way that didn't, put people down and all that type of stuff. But his level of thinking was so much higher than what these religious leaders and teachers, all these people meeting in the temple court, he was so much higher than them. And so he would listen, and then he would also say, "Have you ever thought about this possibility?" And their minds were just expanded like 10 times every time he spoke. "Have you ever thought it could mean this?" And they were like, "Wow, we never even heard of anything like that." And it's coming from a 12-year-old. And they were astonished at his words and his answers and even his questions blew their minds. And that is how he started, maybe teaching, not that he had, and this is really tricky because he already knew everything, so he didn't have to learn anything, but how to maybe interact with other people and how to do this. And he was just, the human side of him was growing and learning, right? And a lot of times we don't talk about, I don't feel like we talk enough about the human side of Jesus and the things that he dealt with and things. So he's got the mind of God, the knowledge of God, trapped in a 12-year-old body. What would you even do with that? How would you even cope with that? And then what we find out is that with the mind of God trapped in a 12-year-old body, he obediently leaves with his parents in respect for their position, right? Man, there is so much right there. We could talk about the government that God has put into place. We could talk about our local leaders. We could talk about leadership in the home. We could talk about, there are several things that one passage right there could apply to. And how, even with the mind of God, he submitted to his parents. He submitted to the leadership over him and did exactly what he was supposed to do. He was obedient to the word. And so we can take all these little things. As Jesus grew up, all these little nuggets we can apply to our own lives. Now we're back into the role of the parents. Could you imagine, here's what I want you to imagine for a minute, being gone for 24 hours from Jerusalem and finding out God's son was missing. I mean, you had been visited by an angel at least 2 times. There's probably some other times that things happened and everything. But at least 2 or 3 times, Mary and Joseph had been visited by angels, letting them know how special this child was. They just had the Magi come and give them gifts and everything, several years later, all this stuff. So they've got all this, and they've lost him. Now here's what happens, and here's how this typically would happen, is that they would travel in groups. Right? So they would leave Nazareth, they would go to Jerusalem, they would travel in groups, sometimes it was family, sometimes it was friends, whatever it was. And so what happened was, just like any kind of family caravan or something, everybody piles in one car, some of the kids go in this car, some of the kids go in this car. Well, they get on certain wagons and donkeys and different things, and somebody thinks so-and-so, Uncle so-and-so has Jesus, and Aunt so-and-so has this and everything. So they leave. And they get to a place somewhere where they're going to stop. And so they start setting up camp. They start building a campfire or whatever they're doing. And they realize Jesus is gone. And they go to Aunt so-and-so and Uncle so-and-so. Have you seen Jesus? No, we thought he was with them and them and them. And so that's how that happened. So they pack up everything. And they head back to Jerusalem. And then look for him in Jerusalem for 3 days. They have lost the Messiah. The Savior of the world is missing. Could you imagine when you were praying at night before you fell asleep, God, I'm so sorry I lost your son. I mean, how would you pray? How would you even pray that? Well, maybe he doesn't know. Maybe God doesn't know yet and will find him before he realizes that he's gone. I mean, have you ever thought about these things? How Mary and Joseph felt during these times as they were trying to raise the perfect child, the perfect human being, not really knowing what he's capable of, what his future even holds. And so they finally, after 3 days, they find him in the temple courts. Where have you been? If you're a mom, could you imagine if your mom found you after looking for you 3 days? She'd take that shoe off and whap you. Where have you been? Now I'm sure that Mary was probably very nice about it. Maybe Joseph was like, I couldn't even imagine what that scene, how it played out, what it looked like, how it sounded. Where have you been? Do you have any idea what you've done to your mom and dad? What we've been going through. We thought you were there, and you didn't even tell us. And his response was, you guys should have known where I was going to be. Hasn't there been enough clues in my life that this should have been the first place you looked? Have I not been upfront with you about what the priorities in my life are? And how I obey God and everything that is written in Scripture. How I do that. Hasn't that been clear yet to you? I've been with you for 12 years. Man, you should have known right where I was. But apparently after 3 days, it was almost the last place they looked, wasn't it? And his attitude, Jesus' attitude was like, you should have known I was here all along. Because of all this stuff that I've said, how I've lived my life, the priorities that I have in my life, you should have known where I would be. Verse 51 reveals that Jesus left with them that day and remained obedient to them, growing in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and man. And when I say, when I say being more like Christ tomorrow than we were today, a lot of times that's what I'm picturing. I'm picturing in verse 51 or 52, verse 52, Jesus grew in wisdom and stature. That's what we ought to be doing every day. And we do that by being in the Word. But Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. That's what we're called to do. That's the life that we are called to live as Christians. As believers in Jesus Christ, that's what we ought to be doing. Becoming more mature as each day passes. And so that's my challenge for us this week, is to focus on growing more spiritually mature in certain areas of your life this week. And we've talked about this before, so it's nothing new. But I want to challenge you to grow in wisdom, grow in stature, and more in favor with God and with man this week. And if it's even just one area in your life where you take that baby step towards being more mature, take that step. No matter how small it is. Don't stay where you are. Don't stay comfortable where you are. Grow in stature, wisdom, favor with God and man. Do that this week. Lord, I thank you so much for the opportunity that we have this morning and the freedom that we have to come and worship you and learn from your word, Lord. I always just pray that as we look at this introduction to the rest of Jesus' life, Lord, I would just pray that we would understand there's even application in these verses that we've looked at today for our lives. And Lord, I would just pray that we would open our minds, open our hearts to what you would have and how you would lead us into being more mature as a Christian. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, guys, we got Bible study tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If you're open and you want to come, open to everybody. Thank you very much, and you are dismissed.